What's up, guys? Hope everyone's good and had lovely weekends. Start off as always with a little swig of tea. So yeah, back in the studio for another live stream. Let's have a little clear up. Yeah, so today we're going to be looking at adding some early reflections, reverb, possibly delay, possibly modulation effects to this this track I'm working on, which I'm kind of in the middle of mixing. And I wanted to show you some of my kind of thought process on how I go about this. A lot of people will just really rely on reverb for adding spatial effects, but the busier the music and the faster the tempo, actually the less space you have for reverb. You know, if it's a slow kind of ballad, there's going to be a lot more space for reverb, but a lot of the time you want to give a sense of space without muddying things up. And for music which is destined for the club, reverb can be a kind of energy suck in some ways. It kind of takes space out and just fills things up, and not always in the best kind of way. So I'm going to show you some alternative ways of working. So this is the track we're working on. That's a good start. So my mix downs become quite CPU heavy, and I'm also live streaming this at the same time. So let's see how we get on with this. Hopefully it will hold out, but maybe we'll just do a little loop. So I'm not going to play the whole track. I'm just going to show you that little snippet. Now the first thing is, this is nothing to do with spatial effects, but this is cool. This rhythm guitar part. It's got kind of an annoying low mid thing going on. So what I've got here and what I'm going to do here is something which I use all the time, which is Saturn. And what I've done is, so with the drive all the way down, and my boundaries here go up to about 470 hertz, I've used this dynamics dial and I've kind of expanded the dynamic range so it's less dense in this area. Because let me just take it off. Let's solo it. Can you hear how it kind of becomes a little bit less muddy sounding? I could even take down the level of that band slightly. I don't want that mud in there, so let's see what it's like in the mix. I've got to be careful because I don't want it to sound kind of too thin and annoying sounding. So I wonder what it's like if I actually drive it a little bit as well. And I've driven the top band. Maybe I've driven it a bit too much. Now I can EQ this as well, so let me take down a little bit more of the treble. So just open things out a little bit, because I've just lost a little bit of that muddiness from the rhythm guitar, and because it's such a repetitive part, it's continually playing. If we have a lot of that hammering away in the low mid, it's kind of it's clouding things up a little bit. So that's just something I wanted to show you. Now something else I wanted to show you actually was just on the bass. What I'm going to try doing is I'm going to send this to a bus, a bass miscellaneous bus. I have a lot of buses set up on this project. It's the way I like to work. And I'm going to, this is again before we get onto spatial effects. But if you think about bass guitar, when people in times gone by were recording bass, a lot of time they'd have a DI bass and also a mic'd up bass amp. And I always forget to do this actually, but I've kind of got my DI bass that I ran through my 1073 under the desk. But it's quite cool sometimes to blend it alongside a bit of bass amp as well. Just gives a bit of bite and a bit of extra character. Now, I'm not really an expert in bass amps, so this is the kind of thing where I would go try some presets out. I've actually got some settings here I've used before. I wonder what these are like. It kind of does quite a nice job of just adding a little bit of extra character. Now, ordinarily, I'd probably duplicate this track, copy the audio down, and actually put this alongside it rather than using a bus, but I'm a bit worried about the CPU. And what I'm going to do, I don't know what that's doing. I'm going to delete that because I need to be careful with the amount of CPU that I'm using, and I'm also going to delete these as well. I'm going to try and free up a little bit of processing here. Look at this guitar again. Okay, cool. So that's cool for that. So we've added a little bit of bass amp, and also we've added some kind of expanding the dynamic range in the low mids of the guitar to clear off a bit of space. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to add some early reflections to the drums. Now, why early reflections? Well, for the reasons I said earlier, really, that reverb can really cloud things up a little bit. Whereas early reflections allow you to kind of add in a sense of space and width and make things sound a little bit bigger sounding without the trade-off in terms of loss of space in the mix and separation between elements, because the reverb can fill things up so much. So let's just select. So I'm selecting everything, and I'm going to send a healthy amount of level to a bus that I've already got assigned. So this is my auto load project, which is pretty crazy to the uninitiated. or people who don't understand how it works, it's a bit mental. But I basically have buses already set up, so I know what I'm doing. A lot of buses, which is maybe one of the reasons I have such bad problems with the CPU. But anyway, that's fine. So I'm going to try Altiverb and see if the CPU will allow me to do it. And I'm going to add, as I said, early reflections to these drums. Now, Altiverb is really cool because it means you can go to get classic studio spaces, which are here, studio and scoring. And we can go in and I always seem to use these Psalm settings and try these out. But what we can also do, which is again very cool, is switch off the tail and just have the early reflections or the opposite. So if I wanted to use the same early reflections as the reverb tail, I could have them both switched on. I could even dial in varying amounts of the two. So if I wanted a little bit of reverb, I could do. If I wanted less early reflections, more reverb tail, I could do that as well. The early reflections, what are early reflections? Maybe some people won't know what they are, but they're the initial reflections that will come off the ceiling, the walls around you, the floor. So they're the first reflections you hear from a sound when it hits you. So if I clap my hands, I can tell that I'm in a studio room with treatment up, which is quite dull. If I close my eyes, I get a sense that it's kind of a dull sounding kind of small room. I mean, dull as in not too reverberant. And that's what early reflections allow us to do. The tail is the actual amount of time that those reflections carry on reverberating, essentially, and that's dictated by the type of material that the room is made of. So if we were in a stone room, which was very reverberant, then the tail would be longer. If we were in a room which was covered in padded walls, like a padded cell, then the reverb tail would be very short if they had the same size because of the materials that the room was made of. So early reflections allow us to add a sense of width, depth, fatness. You can also use them to dial in a little bit of more of what you want and less of what you don't. So for example, on that guitar, I could add in an early reflections program and take away some of the low mids and boost some of the tops if I wanted the guitar to be a little bit brighter and less dull sounding. So you can kind of use early reflections to almost like another EQ in a way, or some kind of parallel process to add more of what you want and less of what you don't want. Okay, so let's open this up again. I really hope this doesn't affect my CPU too much, but let's have a listen. Okay. So that's what the early reflections sound like compared to the tail. And this is obviously Psalm West Studios live room. So this is a great sounding room with lots of great treatment up, to be a really nice sounding room. Now, the early reflections, as a general rule, you want to be felt and not heard. So it shouldn't be like when I just mixed it and then it was crazy, obviously. So it should be something that you feel more than you actually kind of looking to hear. And also, everything we've done up to this point is to create space for the reverb and the early reflections to exist in. So if we put the reverb on at the beginning and we haven't done our job of clearing up space in the mix, then actually there is no space for reverb and early reflections to live in. It's just gonna basically accentuate your terrible mix. Not meaning to be harsh, but if your mix sounds terrible, adding reverb and delays and things like that, you're just going to be extending the bad sounds, So you want to make sure that you add the reverb after you've processed the sound. So what I've done with EQ and compression here, and I'll do a video on this at some point. I'll be doing this live next time I get to this stage of a mix. This mix predates when I started doing the live streaming. But let's say the shaker sound, I've rolled off the low frequencies, boosted for some reason in there. I don't know why I did that. A lot of the sounds I will have rolled off tops. So that's frozen that track. I've rolled off tops, rolled off bottoms to try and create space in the mix. And like with that guitar, I took out some of the low mids to allow me to add in spatial effects to fill those gaps, basically. But without having the gaps to fill, there's no space to add in any of these things. So let's bring it in slowly. hear the awesome sense of aliveness. So this is only the drums. It's added to the drums without it being overtly reverberant. And as a general rule, I like to bring it in to the point where it's too much and then dial it back a bit. Okay, apologies for these system overload messages. As I said, I'm already maxing out the CPU on this track, which is probably due to all my crazy routings. But anyway, so I'm a little bit concerned by the fact that this is kind of right dominant like that. I'm not really sure, so I might try a different studio type. Let's see what else we can get. Okay, so that was quite nice. Yeah, quite like that as well. So often this is something I like doing in headphones, and in fact I'm going to put the headphones on, because what you'll find the early reflections also really bring out the kick drum, and a lot of people will EQ out the low frequencies from reverbs, which generally in reverbs is a good thing to do, but on early reflections it can add an awesome sense of low frequency fatness to things. Okay, yeah, I like that. So we'll work with that just for the time being and see how we get on with this. Now, another thing we can do is add pre-delay to the sound. Now, can be a little bit of a hard thing to get your head around, but actually, the longer the pre-delay we have, the more the sound will appear forward in the mix. Okay, so the less pre-delay, the further a sound will appear away. I'm sorry, the further a sound will feel it is away from you, the less pre-delay there is. So more pre-delay, closer to sound, less pre-delay pushes the sound back. Why does it do that? Well, let's imagine that we have a sound which is close to us. So we're having a conversation, two people are having a conversation, and the person I'm talking to is really up close to me. Shouldn't be doing that, first of all, social distancing, but let's imagine they were, and they spoke. Then the reverberant energy would be delayed before it hit my ears, because they would be close to me and the surrounding walls would be further away. So they would speak, my ears would get their dry sound essentially, and then the reverberant energy would hit me from the walls around me. Now, the further the longer that pre-delay was, the closer the people would be to me, basically, because there would be the walls and the ceilings would be further away because there'd be more of a delay. Now, if the pre-delay is very long, then it gives you a sense that there's someone speaking to you who's close to you, but you're in a very big space because the sound is coming back much later. But if it was in a small context like this, the pre-delay could be, 10 milliseconds, could be very short, but still having some pre-delay means that the original sound will feel closer. It also means you get a bit of separation between the reverberant energy or the early reflection energy and the original sound itself. So let's try a 10 millisecond. Okay, this is getting a little bit difficult. Let's try this a different way, in fact. Let's go to Valhalla Room, and this is a good thing for me to realize that live streaming whilst mixing a very intensive project is maybe not the best thing to do, but you live and learn. So this is maybe a little bit more of a realistic plugin that people are going to have, and hopefully it's going to use a bit less CPU, which is Valhalla Room. So with Valhalla Room, we can do the same thing. Look at that. Controls the depth between early and late energy. This is late energy, i.e. reverb. This is early reflection energy. So with this plugin, we can set the size of the room using the early size. I've massively boosted it so we can hear what we're doing. So you can hear the awesome presence and width and energy that's added by the early reflections. Okay, what we can also do is actually add in some compression to this as well. So I can't use that one. I came up with a compressor that I was going to use for the overall drums to give them the same kind of settings. No, that's not actually the same. I think I changed it for that sound. That's better. So I had a 10 millisecond attack. So kind of holding things in place a little bit. So let's paste that. And let's go for about a dB of gain reduction. Okay, so we've added some nice kind of presence there. Let's go to this snare bus. And in the verb section, I'm going to add in, I'm just going to go for a basic plate, Valhalla plate. So this may be the only time I use reverb in the whole track. It's just on this clap and snare sound. Now, if we want to be really kind of precise, we can do things like this even. So the BPM's already set. We could even set kind of our decay time to be musical in terms of beats and bars. So we could say, all right, let's make the reverb decay a 16th note. You've got to be careful because the decay will get to a point where it's not audible. So not all of that 122 milliseconds is going to be audible. So we could even extend it maybe slightly. But this is always better off being done by ear, really, but it can be quite a good little start point. Try increasing the pre-delay a bit. So what I've done here is I've copied across a compressor that's mono. So we've lost the width perception we had. Okay, so once again, so just with that one move, I've opened up this mix to have a lot of extra space in it just by bringing in these early reflections on the drums and also the reverb on the clap and snare. Okay, apologies again for that system overload. So with the reverb, I could look at EQing this. I've been trying to use less high pass filters and more low shelves because they can be more natural sounding and introduce less phase issues. I'm trying to check on my bass here. Yeah, so I'm kind of losing low end somehow with this bus here. I think maybe it's some kind of phase issue. There's something up with that, so I'm going to leave that off for the time being. Okay, so one more time. So it almost brings the drums forward, even though we're adding something which is putting them in a sense of space. They're drier without it, but they almost become more dry, but not more dry, but just kind of wider. It's like they kind of now exist in a space with you. So before we put this effect in, I'm just going to make the size a bit smaller. The only sense of space you're getting from the drums is the space in which you're listening to them. And in this case of headphones, no space at all because they're strapped to my ears. So the early reflections allow you to add that sense of space, basically. Okay, we'll leave it at that. So again, I'm kind of conscious of the fact we're losing the stream here. We're losing the getting the system overload messages. So I'm just going to keep it kind of short now and show you some other things. So some of the other sounds I've already got spatial effects on. So when this guitar comes in here, don't want to play that. So using this pedal here, which you probably can't see, but it's a Strymon dual digital delay pedal. I've already bounced in a stereo slap program, and I've used Wave Center to take out a lot of the mono signal and just kept the side signal. Okay. What else have we got here? So this sound, that's not going anywhere. This sound has where is it? I was pretty sure this sound had an H delay on it. I don't know where that's gone. Okay, but so we have the stereo slap program with that taken out. So again, I'm using that to create space. It's not reverb. We do have a bit of reverb on this sound. That shouldn't be going anywhere. So we've got a Valhalla Vintage. Just on an ambient setting. And then we have an Echo Boy, which I'm confused about because I'm pretty sure I had an H delay. Oh no, okay, maybe that's right. So I use a digital delay setting on Echo Boy because I wanted something quite clean, because for the other guitar sound, the rhythm guitar sound, I wanted to add in, I use my Eventide Rose pedal for like a dirty kind of slap delay, but in fact I think I've replaced it. I have, yeah. So instead I used an Echo Boy with some saturation, going through this DMT setting with some of the highs rolled off. Well, they were rolled off until I changed it. So it's quite a kind of dirty kind of slap, and I wanted to contrast that with a very clean digital delay, so that that tropical guitar and the rhythm guitar have contrasting spaces to them. But you can see that in this whole track so far, I've only used reverb twice now. An ambience program, which is practically early reflections on that tropical guitar, and a plate reverb on the clap. And that may be the only reverb I use in the whole track, because my kind of golden rule is that if I'm going to apply reverb, I need to be able to hear it. So it's not something I apply by default. I only apply reverb to a sound where I can actually hear the reverb doing something, because otherwise we're just clouding things up for no reason. If you can't hear it, what's the point in it being there? So that's kind of my approach really to spatial effects, is try to combine delay, which I did on the guitar to create space, early reflections, which I used predominantly for the drums. Let's actually try dialing in some reverb on the drums as well. So it's not bad with the reverb in, but I'd still prefer it with the early reflections. Now this actually should be 100% wet because we're using it on a send. Now, we've got some keys parts that come in. These are 100% dry at the moment. Now, there's nothing stopping me actually. Let's try copying and pasting the setting from the drums. I mean, why do they have to play in a separate space? They could be just playing in the same space as the drums. Don't need to make life complicated unnecessarily. So, so the first bus is always the synth early reflections bus. So I'll paste that in. Now this is a less important sound in some ways, so I could actually try this without any pre-delay because it will kind of push it back a little bit. Okay, let's try it in the mix. This guitar, there's too much going on with these guitars, so I'm going to try taking down the mix on the slap on the rhythm guitar. Okay, so let's just look at the levels of some of these guitars as well. Okay, that sounds cool. I just took down some of the effects there because it's getting a little bit too much. So I got a little something going on here, guys. So let me just So okay, we're gonna have to leave it in a second, but we'll just carry on for the minute. So on this this brass part here, comes in somewhere. Here it is. There's another thing we could use as well as early reflections and reverb, which is things like sample delays, chorus as well, doublers. So we could put on, let's say, try this doubler out. So this will give an awesome stereo delay. Stereo width. It's kind of a Hass effect, which can also be used to place the sound kind of in a pseudo space as well. Also helps push the sound out to the side and make it much more stereo. And we could even push this a bit further, take out some of the middle signal. So it's starting to exist outside of where the guitar's playing. And what I'm going for with my mix is to be able to get the mix to escape from the speakers. So I want the keys to feel like they're wider, the guitar's in the middle, and that's going to really help there. Okay, so this is another sound which could do with maybe some of these early reflections. I'm actually not sure I need that sound. Do I need it here? Now obviously we need to do something with this up sound here because it's very dry at the moment. So I could try something like maybe a Soundtoys effects rack, maybe with like a ping pong echo boy on it. maybe even some kind of micro shift going on. Okay, so I'm going to automate this in, I think. Beautiful. I could even have this kind of escaping off into oblivion with the reverb afterwards. Something about this sound that I just really don't like, actually. There's actually a couple of things we could try with this. I might take it off ping pong, put it on single echo. Now, actually, something you'll find is that you can clear up space by making things more mono and less stereo, in fact. So let's put this to mono. Let's use the direction mixer instead. So we could make it really wide or completely mono. Yeah, I quite like that actually. I'm just really not into this sound anymore. trying to work out if I need that kick attack sound in there. Anyway, I'm getting sidetracked. This probably means that it's coming to the end of having a productive session. So I might leave it there. So hopefully out of this, you can see that you don't have to use reverb all the time. You can use early reflections, gives you a great sense of width and presence without sacrificing space in the mix. Then you can use the reverb to kind of fill out areas and make sure that you create a mix in the first place that has space for these sounds to be able to exist in. Faster pace the track, the less space there is for lots and lots of reverb. Yeah, and you can use delays, choruses, stereo wideners, things like that to create pseudo spatial effects in your mix as well, so you don't have to keep on resorting to piling on the reverb. Cool. Okay, look, I hope you found that useful. So I'll be back live tomorrow. I haven't quite worked out what I'm going to do yet, but hopefully I'll be on a project which is not going to be giving us system overload messages, because that was a bit of a vibe killer. But I hope you nonetheless found it useful. And just hit me up any questions you've got. If you want me to demonstrate anything further later on in the week, then just let me know. Cool. Have a good week. Cheers.